Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. While people are joining us, I'm going to go ahead and talk just a little bit about process, and that'll give people a chance to log in and be a part of what's going on. So our process today is basically a repetition by hour. At 8 o'clock, we're going to convene it, and the mayor is convening that, and we're going to hear his reflections for the day. And then every hour on the hour, we will be shifting to some other reflections from other vantage points and from other San Antonians in the city. So, and then every hour it just repeats itself, and we're going to be bringing up a schedule along the way so that you can start to plan your day. I do want to make a note that today was powered and is being powered by San Antonians for San Antonians. In particular, sacred.org is powering this moment. And if you don't know about sacred.org, it's a citywide directory that connects nonprofits, congregations, city entities, organizations who are doing really important resourcing on the ground, near and in proximity where people really need the help. So this whole day was put together by volunteers and people who live in San Antonio, like everyone else that's zooming in and watching today. So I wanted to take note of that. Our schedule for the day, I think we have a slide on that so that we can see, and you can plan your days a little bit. At 8, we open up, and then you can see some of the other faith traditions and perspectives that will be coming in, as well as kind of topically where those will be headed a bit. At 9 o'clock, we'll be hearing from the Indigenous community and reflections there and what this means and within spirituality and faith tradition, but also the healing that's needed, and that's a part of reflecting as well. So that's kind of the process for today. Please compassionately bear in mind that we've not done this before. And so we're doing this and we're trying this. And it has been known that Zoom will shut down in the middle of things. If that happens, Bill, who is with Sacred, he's waving his hand now, he will restart the whole thing. So take a breath if it shuts down. Take a breath, give a couple moments, and then come back on. And hopefully we'll just keep moving forward as we go. So be kind with each other and flexible. If there's time at the end of each hour, we'll be opening up the chat room and taking in questions, possibly, if there's time. There's viewers on many different platforms. Everyone should realize that now that we're on this live stream, that you're no longer anonymous. And so to be aware of that as well. That said, I want to just go to our convening slide, which I think is the next one, Bill. And just introduce some people for the mayor, and they can all wave. I hope that they're on a slide, but they can wave. But Mayor, these are the folks that helped put together today, our volunteers. Vance Blackfox, he's gonna wave at you now. He's the lead of our Religious Discrimination and Diversity Action Team with the initiative. Mehmet, I think you might even know Mehmet. He too is on the team, and he's a board member of the Raindrop Foundation. I don't know if Brian is with us yet, but he's with sacred.org and also with Give Pulse. The Reverend Dr. Dhawn Martin, she's going to wave. She's going to be one of our co-hosts later as well. She serves on the action team, but she also leads the Interfaith Soul Center in town. And Wyndeeolbrook, she helped corral people into this as well, and a part of this team. And she also leads the Interfaith San Antonio Alliance, as well as being a pastor. So those are the team of volunteers who have put together today. They will also be the co-host going down the road. And I just wanted to introduce everyone to them. So Mayor, as we begin, and for all of us to begin today, I just want to take a moment to take a pause, because that's part of what reflection is about. Deep breath. And I want to ask for a moment of silence for those who are suffering today, in particular in terms of the COVID virus, for those who have passed and their family members and friends. And so if we could just take a moment to do that. Thank you. So a dear friend of mine always says, we've been preparing our entire lives for this very moment. And so I think that means a lot, and we're going to be hearing a lot about that today. What prepares people, what keeps us strong, what we're reflecting on, but it also makes me think of, what does reflection even mean? And if you look it up, it's basically two definitions. The one is that throwing back or the bouncing thing. So when we look even into Zoom and into my picture now, that image is being bounced back, or a mirror, or the wind bounces back, or the sun against the side of a house, that kind of throwing back like information. But it's also that serious introspection. So we're taking time today to pause into that sacred intersection. And it's hard to believe, but just a week ago, Mayor, you asked that we do this day of reflection. So I'm going to ask you, why did you want to do this today, and why is it important?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Reverend Helmke, for working so quickly to put this together. I'm actually quite amazed, but maybe I shouldn't be. I do remember, I think it was exactly a week ago, around the same time, I texted you and asked if you thought that maybe we should try to convene another day of reflection. If people remember, one of the most profound moments, I think, of our tricentennial celebration a couple of years ago was the day of reflection, where we had all of the different faith congregations, or most of them, represented in front of San Fernando Cathedral. And we were able to convene over a couple of hours with a candle lighting ceremony, a day and evening of just reflecting the faith journey of San Antonio, but also the millions of people who have shared our community. And so waking up on Saturday after we had essentially begun our journey together of staying home in order to save each other's lives, you know, it was a stark difference between those days where we were trying to get as many people together in one place as one time, which is sort of antithetical of what we're trying to do right now from a physical standpoint. So I thought it was an opportunity and perhaps a necessity for us to convene, especially as people of faith together in our different social distance, come together spiritually, emotionally, and humanly to remind ourselves that we are, in fact, interwoven and connected, even while we are trying to keep our physical distance. And I'm very grateful that we're here this morning to remind ourselves of that. And I think that over the next however long this unfortunate pandemic occurs, we're going to have to continue to remind ourselves of that, because it's so easy for the physical distance to become, in fact, emotional and spiritual and social distance when it really shouldn't be.
So just a little bit more on that question. What kind of impact do you think can come out of reflection, taking this time?
Well, for me, it is, it's a moment for us to all pause together, because I think we have a lot of time to think and reflect. And certainly we've probably, if anyone's experienced this, obviously we're not able to go to a lot of places that we're used to going. So there's a lot of time we now have that we always say we want to just sit and be quiet and think. And there's a lot of that, but I think in our own rooms or our own homes, doing that alone, you can forget about the connection that you have with other people. So how powerful would it be for us to all sit and reflect together, think together, reflect on who we are and why we're on this journey together in terms of keeping our physical distance. And it's a very powerful thing to think that, we can all have a moment together where we're reflecting on that.
I saw video in the last week, and I think that's one of the hopeful things that's happening, or that all the reflections that are happening, and people are writing and people are talking to each other, probably more than ever. But one video I watched, which was really informative to me, and it was obviously out of reflection, but compared to what we're going through, somewhat to a war, but was really looking more at the metaphor at the different parts of the military. So the army being that kind of ground force, and then that the doctors and the nurses and the grocers and the garbage collectors and those scientists who are working there are our ground force, and all of the information that you and the city have been putting out to help people move forward. That's that ground force, right? How do we get organized? But then also the metaphor went from that to the Navy, and that, traveling on the surface and below the surface even. So the importance of reflection below the surface of political leaders, and that intellectual work, the analysis, and how important it is to compare those charts that are going up and down. And then the Air Force, the, above ground, and the essential work of prayer and spirit and strengthening and things that remain. I just thought that was an important reflection. And so I'm wondering how you see reflection in terms and its importance to the bigger picture and that bigger work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, there is, I do remember the email that you sent about the words that we use, and how, it's unfortunate this notion of social distancing has become how we think about what we're trying to do during a pandemic, where we're trying to keep physical separation, but social distance is not, that shouldn't imply that we lose our relationships with people, and we have to use, unfortunately, technology and other means of maintaining those relationships. But during a reflection, I didn't think about ground, air, and Navy, but we do have to remember why we're doing this. There are people who are not able to keep physical distance right now, and they are having, their job requires them to be right in the thick of potential danger when it comes to the eradication of a virus. Those people are nurses, they're doctors, they're police officers and firefighters, they're EMS personnel, they're daycare workers, there are counselors and many other people who are not able to pause and reflect. They just have to, like you said, be on the ground. But it's within, it's within our ability to pause for a moment and remind other people who might not be taking this or might not understand why we're doing this. It's actually to do our part as neighbors and friends and family members of those people who are not able to stay off of the front lines, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see what we're doing here in San Antonio? How does that reflection today impact, say, our country, the planet, the bigger picture? How does what we do in reflection impact the bigger picture?
I hope it catches on. I really do. I don't know how. So everybody in the country right now is experiencing this one way, shape, or form. In fact, I would think that many people around the world are experiencing this kind of feeling of being cooped up, at least in industrialized nations. They're having this feeling of being isolated for the first time, forced isolation for the first time. And everyone is experiencing that right now. And if San Antonio has taught the world something, it is that through out our history, we've been able to bring people together of all different backgrounds and faiths and cultural, upbringings and lived experiences to feel and experience one unified humanity. It's one of the reasons why I think the Day of Reflection during the Tricentennial was so amazing, is that it seems so normal. And so if we can think, if this kind of convening over the internet could be a thing here in San Antonio, and perhaps other compassionate cities that we're networked with, or sister cities that we're networked with, can model the same thing in their communities. Imagine how powerful it would be when we're all back on the subways and the trains and the buses and back to work, where we would commit to doing something like this with other places around the world, because we are still physically distanced from them, but we shouldn't be socially, emotionally, and morally distanced from them during the rest of the year.
I've also been amazed at how, and grateful, how I think clear and grounded our leadership has been through this, and calm. So I'm grateful for that. But I also know that takes effort to be that way, to stay grounded. I know that for me in general, to stay focused and grounded, I keep people and things around me that I know keep me strong. So like even behind me, I have pictures of my parents, two of my favorite pictures. I love look at them, but they help me to stay strong when I see them. I'm wondering during this time, what are some things, some wisdom or some actions in your life that have helped you to keep grounded and focused?
I'm still trying to put it up on my phone, bring it up on my phone, but I get a daily reflection every day in my inbox from Reverend Galen Gungrich. Anyway, it's a daily reflection that comes to my email with a little quote. Yesterday, I got one. It's always a great quote. Sometimes it's a secular quote. Sometimes it's a scripture. Yesterday was from Maya Angelou. It said, "What you're supposed to do when you don't like a thing is change it. And if you can't change it, change the way you think about it. Don't complain.
Mm.
So that was my thought for yesterday. I get these every single day, and they're always quite appropriate. But what do I kind of hang on to? I actually, my day is quite full and hectic and a little chaotic on a normal basis. It hasn't changed a whole lot in that respect, although there's fewer people around me. But something that I started doing probably 10, 12 years ago, at the end of every night when everybody goes to sleep, I go sit alone outside on the back porch and listen to some music in my earphones. I still do that, believe it or not, although it's a little different because it seems like the rest of the day that's the same kind of distance I'm experiencing, but I still do that. But I would mention one thing. Something really strange has happened, and that is I get a ton of email, and that's great. And we stay connected through email, but I seem to have been getting a lot more written letters lately. People are taking a moment to handwrite things. And so I'm doing that as well. And that's, it's interesting because, an email comes through a screen and, all the characters look the same, but when you write somebody a letter, you actually can touch it. You can see the ink, you can actually feel the paper, and you see their personality come through in their handwriting. And I think strangely enough, we've gotten, so maybe it's a trend, I don't know, maybe it's not, but people are taking the time that they have to physically connect in ways that perhaps they weren't doing when we're in the middle of the hustle and bustle. And a letter is one of those things. Yesterday, Erica and I got a letter from my nephew who's been working really, really hard for the last year and a half. He was staying with us. He's from the Rio Grande Valley. He was staying with us so he could complete his senior year in high school at Lee High School because his dream was to become a U.S. Marine. And he had to go through all the testing and everything. So we're helping him, stay focused and get through the test. And he took the test. He's been working really hard. He finally, passed the entry test. He was so excited. We're so excited for him too. He was set to go to boot camp in August this year, but they found him an early date, which he was excited for. So he left in early February. Amazing. We're so proud of him. He's going to San Diego to start boot camp and become a U.S. Marine. And basically a week or two after he left, the pandemic started. And unfortunately, we just got a letter last night that said he's doing great, but unfortunately they canceled his graduation. So none of those Marines who have been working so hard are going to be able to have their families come down to San Diego and watch them, officially become a U.S. Marine. It's something he's worked his entire life for, and something we were so excited to see him do. Instead of the celebration, instead of the graduation, he's going to go directly into infantry training. So we have to skip this major life event. But I guess we got the letter. It's a physical reminder. We can physically be with him in that moment. But I guess it's a reminder that, there's I don't know how many families also got a similar letter. But we're not alone in disappointment. We're not alone in rescheduling things. We're not alone in the disruption in our lives. We're sharing that with people. We're sharing with families. And at the end of this, when we're all through this and we're back to the hustle and bustle, maybe we can keep some of that with us. Maybe it's the physical letters. Maybe it's the feeling that, I shouldn't dwell on my own disappointment because there are hundreds of other families that are experiencing the same thing. And maybe let's work on that together and schedule our own graduation, or work on having a reunion that celebrates the missing the missing graduation ceremony. There's ways we connect through our feelings, even when they're not great, that I think can help us bring people together when they're better.
Mm-hmm. So we're also kind of seeing that hybrid of old school and new school, happening. And which is, we're in another sense, we're evolving, we're not ever going to be the same people, right? We're changing. That's as absolutely certain. But the things that you're talking to in terms of actions and grounded and being focused. And I also think about you because I know that you work out. So that's part of it too.
I'm trying. It's in the garage again.
Yeah, but those are the kind of those ongoing things. But, when things get, kind of heated up in a moment, and there's a lot of that right now. I know for me that that what comes to mind in those more critical moments, so all those other things that I do to keep me generally grounded in moments, there are like one-liners that come to me. Be the change you wish to see. Just be that, do it, right? The golden rule comes to mind. In this moment, treat this other person the way I would want to be treated. And I think the 6 words that are most important from my Christian faith tradition are do not worry and don't be afraid. So when I get heated up and I'm worried and I hear it, I'm worried, oh, don't worry. It shifts things. Or if I get a little frantic or nervous or scared about something, I'm like, don't be afraid. So in that moment, I pause and I back up to reflect on why am I afraid? And then it shifts me. Are there things like that you utilize when things are more tense and more heated? And so much of that is happening right now. So what do you grab onto in those more difficult moments?
Yeah. Sometimes I call my dad because he's the most chill person that's ever walked the earth. And there's nothing that really rattles him. So whenever I'm overly rattled, sometimes I just call him and he has some ridiculous thing he'll say as to why I shouldn't be concerned about something. No, I think about things that my parents or my grandparents have taught me. I think about, I try to elevate a little bit and get beyond my own perspective and think about things a little bit bigger picture. I think about what other people might be going through. I love your quote or the 6 words from scripture. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to worry a lot about stuff. And I found I don't know if it was my mom or someone at the church who kind of gave me a scripture. And I don't remember, I could paraphrase it, but it's something like, worry never did anyone any good, and it caused the ruin of many kingdoms. So I try to think about that. But, that's exactly why I try to not to get too specific, but that's why I work out, really. I do have to blow off some steam. In fact, my own staff and my family know when I haven't, and they force me to go do it because it makes everybody around me happier. Mm-hmm. But you have to find outlets. It is why I spend, the 10 minutes on the porch every night, listening to music. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of like the really old stuff, like 50s.
Be careful here.
Well, really sorry.
No,
I was going to say really old rock and roll, like the roots of rock. Not old, 50s is old. I wasn't going there. I posted sometimes I have this hashtag I use called Ron's Heavy Rotation, and I just occasionally take a screenshot of what I'm listening to and put it on Instagram. It turns into a little bit of a playlist. But a couple nights ago, I was listening to Santos and Johnny, who had that song Sleepwalk. There's no words in it, but I've been listening to a lot of old instrumental rock and roll. I post that up. Yeah, and I try to start my day with the reflection. I will tell you, every Friday morning, and I've not been very faithful to this. We started this probably 4 years ago. Every Friday morning, Rabbi Chaim Block and I talk on the phone for about 3 minutes, for the sole purpose of giving me a Torah lesson, a Mishnah, something new. He's going to preach about it that night. Which is strange for a kid who grew up Catholic to call his rabbi on Friday morning. But he gives me a great lesson, and Jewish tradition is always very grounded in the lessons are always very grounded in reality. They're always very appropriate to some craziness I'm dealing with during the day. And then, of course, on Sundays at Colonial Hills United Methodist with Pastor Polly, gives me a good start to every week. She's fantastic. She's very, she's the kind of forward-looking, inclusive leader that I think churches are blessed with right now in many places, and she gets me going with a sense of the call of the work that we do every day.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and maybe this is, and you've kind of mentioned it, but the silver lining of what's happening now, the beautiful things of people coming together and, like right now, getting to know you better. Who has time as a community to, hear that? But that's kind of, for me at least, the silver lining. And you talk about, wouldn't it be great when all of this is over if we continued at least some of this, right? What if we only did this, right? And I'm already seeing it in that silver lining, where people are practicing that ethic of reciprocity, treating others the way they wish to be treated. Some of the great things that I've seen that made me smile are the food pantries that are in people's driveways right now. The teachers who are on parade through the neighborhoods, right? That we're already seeing this great potential. In fact, we're living it. I'm wondering, and very specifically, so I'm wondering what your hopeful vision is, kind of on 3 levels. Your hopeful vision for those you serve, your hopeful vision for those you lead, and your hopeful vision for those who are nearest and dearest to you. So what's your vision? I think they're probably close, but I think you might have different angles on each of those too. I might be wrong.
Yeah, the first two, the people I serve and lead, sometimes they're the same in many ways. When you get down to pandemic response, everything that we're doing is trying to save people's lives and livelihoods. And there are certain things that only we can do. But at the end of the day, it's really about, doing for them, doing for us the best we can to make sure that we get through this as whole as possible. My hopeful vision for us, and not just a day of reflection, but as we go through the next several months or the relief efforts and the restoration of our communities, is that we will take a lot of lessons learned. One thing I'm really thinking about right now is the fact that in all of our systems of society that have been disrupted, people from the highest offices of the world and all of the communities of the world are starting to realize the same thing, which is that something that I think is often neglected in public policy, which is that we can't do it alone. Take, for instance, our food supply. It's not an industry-driven thing. It's a human thing. And in order for us to make sure that our neighbors have food on the table, we have to participate in that. We have to participate in that through compassionate acts of restraint by not buying everything on the shelves at once. We have to participate in that by making sure that, those who are in food service are not are able to make it by when the jobs have been disrupted. We have to participate in that by making sure that those who are in farming labor are able to take care of their families and have livelihoods about them and their own health. We have to participate in that and making sure that the food that eventually makes it onto our tables is of is safe in quality and is prepared in ways that sustain us. So there are so many ways in every industry that we take for granted that is being disrupted right now, that we're reminded that we're all interconnected. And my hope is that when we start rebuilding and restoring our communities, that we're doing so in a way that is more equitable and realizes those connection points. In many ways, all the things that we've been doing, and certainly that I've been trying to do in City Hall, has been to re-engineer some of the challenges and problems that we know have existed in our community, whether it's the fact that, hundreds of thousands of people grow up in San Antonio and have never had the opportunity to advance an education because of barriers. It's the fact that we've been building a city in many ways that has inequitable access to simple things like shelter and transportation. It's a city that has continued to build on policies like redlining that are in the past, but we've been trying to reverse engineer as we continue to move forward in the world. It's adding one brick on top of a building that already exists. In many ways, our systems of society have experienced a tremendous earthquake. Life is systems as we know them have stopped, and there's no longer the opportunity to put bricks on an existing building anymore. Mm-hmm. So my hope is that rather than focus on putting bricks and trying to reverse engineer a society that in many ways has started from an unlevel foundation, that we can work together to build a stronger foundation for the generations who will come after us, who can achieve the great things that we've been trying to achieve by trying to undo some of the things that we've seen come before us.
Mm-hmm. We're going to get ready to open up the chat line, and while Bill's working on that, so for your family, those nearest and dearest to you, what's your hopeful vision there?
Well, obviously hopeful, and also for the people I serve and the people I lead. I hope for their safety and their health, their good health, not just physical health, but also emotional, mental health during all of this. My hope is that Jonah's 11 now. He understands what's going on. He hears about it. He sees it. My hope for Jonah is that this doesn't turn into an extended vacation. That the disruption in school, the disruption in our lives he will look back and not remember that as that, that weird little break in between, grades, or that strange long summer. But he'll remember why we stopped. Even though he's 11 and all of his friends are probably figuring out ways they can get around their screen time limits, that he remembers why we're doing this. And he remembers why we are stressed. And he remembers why the decisions that we're making right now, for better or for worse, I hope for better, have led to a more enlightened society. Obviously, my hope for Erica and me and Jonah and our extended family too is that we're able to stay connected as a family, that they understand, and that they understand that, and they forgive me, basically, is what I'm getting at, is that I hope I'm forgiven for the time and the energy and the mental capacity that I'm not present because I can't be. But that through this whole process of us being apart, not just me and my family, because I'm actually here right now, but us, from our friends and our coworkers and things, just like within the community as a whole, that will also keep us closer together, and that they don't. Throughout this disruption, they don't forget I still like chocolate cake and rare steak and not rare, medium rare. They remember the things that we like about each other, not just the inconveniences that are part of this whole process.
Yeah, one of the reflections that I read in these last couple of weeks, which was a really good reminder, somebody said, we all remember what we were doing 9/11 when we heard. Some of us remember when Kennedy died, where we were. But most importantly, we might not remember like all those details of those events, but we remember where we were. We remember how we felt. We remember how leadership and acted or moved forward, right? And the point the reflection was making is that our children are watching.
Yeah.
So the things that they're going to remember are those kinds of things. And I'm really hoping, for example, that my grandchildren and children are watching right now, because I think this is a very significant and important moment that we're doing. It's as important as the Air Force, right? It's as important as the ground force and the analysis and working towards the vaccines. How we relate to each other is as critical. How we stay strong and grounded is as critical as everything else. And our children are learning while we're doing this. And I just kind of to remind you as a human that in hearing you, part of compassion is gratitude. Gratitude is a compassionate act of everything that you're doing and what's happening, that gratitude. But forgiveness is also a compassion move. And so, and forgiveness actually means that giving beforehand. So I'm sure, because you've got a strong family, that's happening. So we're all out here supporting you. I'm hoping we've got some questions coming in. Do we have any questions, Bill? I'm wondering if one of our co-hosts want to ask that and talk a bit. We've got about 14 more minutes. Anyone? Here's Dhawn.
Hello, I thought there was a question. I was trying to open up the chat. I saw one from Vance. Was there a question from you? Vance, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I put it in the chat as directed. Hello, Mayor. Thank you. I'm just curious, you know, some of us are at home, probably more committed to staying home and charged by our loved ones and others more than you get to be. And so I'm just curious that in your work daily and in your interaction throughout the city in the last weeks, where have you witnessed points and lights of hope in our community that others of us might not get to see?
Yeah, well, I'm in like emergency operations mostly, whether that moves from you know, a room in City Hall or at the Emergency Operations Center. So I'm mostly with first responders and healthcare workers at the moment, or our city manager. And, you know, my hope in terms of the operation of this whole thing lies in the fact that those folks are just, they're ironclad. I mean, they are unfazed. They've got smiles in their faces, and they are totally unfazed. The hospital workers, they know what they're doing, and so that's very hopeful for me. I am also hopeful, and I'm inspired by Erica. She's been doing some of the drop-offs for, and I didn't even know this until I read about it and I asked her about it. She was doing some of the drop-offs for the free library, you know, street pantry. And also I am, and I'm just inspired also by, you know, my team in City Hall, who are largely now working away from home, or working away from the office. We're getting flooded with phone calls. We're getting flooded with comments and questions, and they are just they're just enjoying every opportunity to interact with people and giving them hope and inspiration. I'm honestly just inspired by the San Antonio community. I think we're really coming together in a moment that's very difficult, and you know, just displaying the best of teamwork and compassion right now, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. We've been through this before.
We have a question here. What advice do you give to educators as they face the challenge of supporting their students remotely? What would you say to these children about this time?
Wow. You know, I was just on a conference call with all the superintendents yesterday who've had to make very difficult decisions themselves. And I've seen Jonah now with his remote learning that they're doing with SAISD. You know, what I would say to teachers right now is that they are the first responders of our next generation. For our next generation, you know, we largely know that children right now are they're not accustomed to being on screens learning. They're not accustomed to being at home. And, you know, the work that they have been doing in school to, you know, keep those brain synapses growing is so critically important to the future of our world, that in many ways, the teachers who are now experiencing something that we probably couldn't have imagined before, on a scale that we couldn't have imagined before, are now having to respond to a crisis that isn't immediate. It's you know, we're going to experience 10 years from now. The emotional learning, the academics involved in that they're either going to continue or miss out on are important for our global community health. And they're on the front lines of that. And so I want to say thank you for their continued commitment and their selflessness and flexibility during this time, but also remind them that more than ever now, especially so, they are admired and honored for their work, because largely the stability of the world 10 years from now will be seen in how we were able to get that done for our children in this very uncertain time. And what is there a question about what I would say to the kids?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't take this as a vacation. Get to work.
We all have our job, right?
Yeah, and your screen that you might have now is not for, what is it? What's the, I don't know what game Jonah's playing right now, but it's not for that. It's for doing your work. Get your work done, and then we'll all get through this a lot better.
Even screen time is evolving, right? We've got some comments here that are wonderful. No question right now. This is the what came in, but would like to thank you, Mayor, for your amazing leadership abilities, especially during these times of uncertainty. You're the best, and we're so grateful that you're our mayor. In our weakness, whoops, phone here, he is seen to be strong. Thank you for your leadership, Mayor. As a pastor, what is one thing that's not, it's coming from a pastor. What is one thing you wish for me to say to our folks on behalf of San Antonio and your office? So as a faith leader, what would you want faith leaders to be telling their congregants?
Well, I hate to be so practical, but the single best act of compassion right now is to stay home. Ironically, it's to connect through other means. It's to pick up the phone and call your mom, but it's to do it at home, because we know the realities of what the pandemic health part of this is, and so to remind people that that this is a serious thing, but that we should have hope. We should stay connected just as we do now. But what I'm trying to do, and there's this great phraseology that's happened all across the world right now. It's just caught on out of, it just happened. But everyone is starting to say we're in this together, which is absolutely true. And it's slightly ironic since we're all not together right now physically, but we are all in this together. And I would say, continue to remind your folks that as you're looking through the screen and giving your sermon. And there's one other thing that I'm also signing most of my emails and messages with now is that the sun also rises, and reminding people we will be through this. We will be through this. And the lessons and the commitments that we make when we're in the thick of it are really, really important to remember. Let's remember why we have heart pangs because we're not able to join our friends or meet our neighbors. Let's remember that and remind ourselves of that when we are able to again.
Mm-hmm. We have one last one, and I think we have time for it, but I think it's really good. From Mona on Zoom. During this unprecedented time, leaders have a huge role to play in conveying a tone of compassion. Some leaders are exhibiting a tone that it's more important to be in control and not showing vulnerability. What recommendations do you have for us to encourage our organizational leaders to show more compassion? How do leaders learn to communicate a tone that is more familiar than their default leadership style?
Oh, that's a really great question. And something, honestly, I tend to struggle with because we're all in work mode. We're in execution mode, especially when we're in a crisis. But I think it's important, especially for families, and I don't mean just the family with a capital F, but also your work families, your friends, and certainly the family of an organization working together. That you're honest with each other and tell you why you're scared, why you're uncertain, what the variables are that we have to do, and that we will get right if. There's a lot of ifs right now. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of ifs. If we don't do something, this is what we would face. It's okay to say that. You know, it is an important thing for people to understand that if more people don't, let's take a positive. If we are able to continue the charitable acts of San Antonians during a normal year where they give to the food bank, we will be able to feed everyone in San Antonio. If that does not happen, we're going to have a really difficult time. And that's a present, immediate concern right now. If folks continue to hear the call of the San Antonio Blood Bank, the South Texas Blood and Tissue Center, everything's going to be all right. We had a 3-day blood drive. It was awesome. It was at Alamo Dome. It takes all of half an hour to go give blood, and it can save multiple lives. If we're able to continue to roll that and people understand that there's nothing to fear by going to give blood, your cousin who's needing a transfusion or has to have a critical surgery is going to be okay. If people give in to the fear of going outside simply to go give blood, or they're scared of the fact that, of the needle or something, we're going to have a hard time supplying blood. There's a lot of ifs right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. If we are able to show compassion to one another and understand that life is not back to normal, that it's not business as usual right now. All the game has changed in terms of how we treat one another to get everybody in our entire community back on their feet. There's not the same rules, and the rules have changed. If we are able to internalize that and act upon that with the goal of compassion and community, this community is going to be stronger and more resilient than ever. But if we try to go back to normal and business as usual, we're going to be in a lot of hurt. A lot of people are going to hurt even more than they did before. I think it's quite all right. I think it's important to be realistic about that, to be honest about that, to show concern and perhaps discontent about that. And for me, that's what I've tried to do. That's the vulnerable aspect of this. Some answers we don't have, but we do know what we're trying to do.
We've come to the close of our hour, and I want to close with a poem that's come up during this time frame from Lynn Unger. Maybe you read it, but it goes like this. What if we thought of it, this time that we're in, what if we thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands, reach out your heart, reach out your words, reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world our love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. Thank you, Mayor, for convening this day and for having this amazing idea and for spending a whole hour with us this morning. Give your family a hug And
I will.
we've got lots of comments coming in that are just saying, we're praying for you. Bless your work. We got your back. We're behind you, man.
Well, thank you, Ann, for putting all this together. Thank you all for allowing me to join you this morning. I'll be back, I think, throughout the day a little bit. It's definitely this afternoon, but I'll try to check in a little bit more. It's been really great to join you and start the day this way. And remember, we are all in this together, and the sun also rises.
We can do this. Thank you.
Bye, all.
Bye.